What if I told you a 14-year-old could sit through one final spelling test, sing one final hymn, walk out of a one-room schoolhouse, and never sit at a school desk again for the rest of their life? No graduation cap, no prom, no 4 more years ahead, just a door closing. The last morning. The morning starts like any other. Chores before sunrise, oatmeal at the table, a lunch pail packed with the same hands that packed it every day for 8 years. But this morning is different, and everyone in the house knows it without saying so. The walk to the schoolhouse, or the buggy ride if the family lives farther out, feels longer than usual. The 14-year-old notices things they never noticed before. The fence posts along the road, the smell of the barn, the schoolhouse roof coming into view one last time as a student, not a visitor. 8 years, one room. This same building has held this child since they were 6 years old, sitting in the front row, barely able to write their name. Now they sit in the back, among the oldest in the room, having watched 7 classes of younger children rotate beneath them. One teacher, usually a young, unmarried woman barely out of her own 8th-grade education, has taught every grade in this single room the entire time. The walls are the same, the chalkboard is the same. Only the child sitting at the desk has changed, year after year, until this final one. The last lesson. There is no ceremony built into the curriculum for a final lesson. The arithmetic problems on the board look the same as any other Tuesday. The spelling words are pulled from the same worn list. But something about doing it for the last time changes the weight of it. A 14-year-old who has recited memory verses and times tables 1,000 times over now does it knowing the next test will not come. The ordinary becomes quietly significant. Teachers sometimes notice it too, watching their oldest students work through problems they will never assign to them again, a small ending tucked inside an unremarkable Tuesday morning. The program and the parting gift. Many Amish schools mark the last day with a small program, not unlike the Christmas program held months earlier. Students recite verses, sing hymns together one final time as a full class, and parents arrive by buggy to fill the back benches. The teacher often gives each graduating student a small gift, sometimes nothing more than a Bible verse written by hand, sometimes a small handmade item to remember the schoolhouse by. There is no diploma in the way the outside world understands one. The recognition is quieter, built into community presence, and the teacher's personal word rather than a printed certificate. One final game of softball. Recess on the last day carries weight nobody admits out loud. Softball has been the heartbeat of every school day for 8 years, the one stretch of freedom between lessons. On this final day, the oldest students play one last game, often joined by younger siblings and even a few parents who showed up early. The same dirt diamond, worn smooth by years of running feet, hosts one more round of innings before it becomes someone else's playground. Nobody keeps score that matters. What matters is that this is the last time this particular group of children will ever play together as classmates. Walking home for the last time. When the program ends and the goodbyes are said, the walk home feels heavier than the walk there that morning. A 14-year-old carries their gift, maybe a few papers from their desk, and the unspoken understanding that tomorrow will look completely different. There is no September coming where they return to this building. No 9th grade waiting on the other side of summer. For an English teenager the same age, this would be one ending among many more to come. For an Amish teenager, this is the ending. Formal schooling, the structure that has shaped every weekday for 8 years, simply stops here, today, on this road home. No summer of nothing. Unlike teenagers in the outside world, there is no long idle summer stretching ahead with nothing required. The very next morning, the 14-year-old wakes up, and the day looks almost identical to a school day, except the schoolhouse is gone from the schedule entirely. Chores still start before sunrise. But now there is no lunch pail, no walk to the schoolhouse, no afternoon dismissal. Instead, the full day belongs to work. Parents do not treat the end of school as a vacation. It is treated as a transition, a quiet but immediate shift from child to working member of the household, with responsibilities that grow heavier by the week rather than lighter. The boy's new classroom. For a boy, the field, the barn, or a trade shop becomes the new classroom almost overnight. Fathers begin teaching sons the rhythms of farm work in earnest, no longer treating it as light help around chores, but as real apprenticeship. Some boys are sent to work under an uncle or family friend, skilled in carpentry, blacksmithing, or furniture making, learning a trade hands-on the way their fathers and grandfathers did before them. There is no classroom lecture here, only repetition and correction. A plow line that wanders gets redone. A joint cut wrong gets recut. The pace of learning shifts dramatically from how it worked in school. There is no test at the end of the week, no grade written in a book. Mastery is measured by whether the work holds up, whether the fence stays straight, whether the cabinet door hangs true. A father correcting a son in the workshop speaks far less than a teacher ever did, often demonstrating a task once or twice before stepping back and letting the boy work through mistakes on his own. This is by design. Amish craftsmanship has long been built on this method of teaching, passed down with almost no written instruction at all, relying instead on direct observation and repeated practice until a skill becomes second nature. By 16, many of these boys are skilled enough to be paid for outside labor, taking jobs in construction crews, furniture shops, or on neighboring farms that need extra hands during planting and harvest. Some communities have shifted heavily toward this kind of outside employment as traditional farming becomes harder to sustain on smaller plots of land, meaning a boy's apprenticeship might lead him into a pole barn construction crew or a cabinet shop rather than his own family's fields. Either way, the transformation is the same. A 14-year-old who spent the morning reciting spelling words is, within 2 years, operating power tools, handling livestock, or running machinery that would unsettle most outsiders to see in the hands of a teenager. What makes this transition work is the depth of trust placed in it. Nobody questions whether a 14-year-old boy is ready for real labor because the entire community has been raised the same way for generations. Each father wants a son learning the same lessons under his own father's hand. His education, having shifted entirely from books to calluses, from a teacher's red pen to a father's quiet nod of approval, is considered just as rigorous in its own right, simply measured in a different currency than grades. The girl's new classroom, the house. For a girl, the transition often centers on the household itself, which becomes a far more demanding place than it was when she was simply helping after school. Mothers begin teaching daughters the full scope of running a home. Not chores in isolation, but the entire rhythm of feeding, cleaning, preserving, and caring for a large family. Canning season, bread baking, garden tending, and caring for younger siblings all shift from occasional tasks to daily expectations, often beginning the very week school ends. The scale of this work is far larger than most outsiders imagine. An Amish household frequently includes 6, 8, or more children, meaning meals are not cooked for a family of 4 but for a small crowd 3 times a day, every single day. A 14-year-old learning to run this household is taught to manage a garden large enough to feed that family through winter, to can hundreds of jars of vegetables and fruit before the first frost, and to bake enough bread in a single session to last the household most of a week. None of this is theoretical instruction. It is learned standing beside a mother at the stove, repeating the same tasks until timing and proportion become instinct rather than something measured with a recipe card. Some girls are sent beyond their own household entirely, helping in the homes of married sisters or relatives with new babies, where they learn childcare directly under supervision rather than simply by watching younger siblings at home. This often includes learning to manage an infant's full daily needs, from feeding schedules to laundry, giving a 14-year-old responsibilities that would be unusual for a girl her age almost anywhere outside this community. Sewing is folded into this education as well, with many girls learning to make and mend the family's clothing by hand or treadle machine, a skill considered just as essential as cooking. By the time she turns 16, a girl raised this way can often run a household nearly as capably as her own mother, managing a kitchen, a garden, a pantry, and younger siblings with a level of competence that took her own mother decades to build under similar instruction. Her 8th grade education, brief as it was by outside standards, has quietly given way to the most practical and demanding curriculum of her life, one she will carry into her own marriage and household within just a few short years. Why the learning never really stops. Outsiders sometimes assume that ending school at 14 means ending education altogether, but Amish families would strongly disagree. The 1972 Supreme Court case, Wisconsin versus Yoder, protected this very practice, ruling that Amish families could end formal schooling after 8th grade without violating compulsory education laws, recognizing that learning continues through apprenticeship and community life rather than a classroom. The case remains one of the most significant religious freedom rulings in American history, and it is the reason this entire tradition is allowed to continue legally to this day, even as most other Americans are required to stay in school years longer. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are considered sufficient groundwork for everything that follows. Beyond 8th grade, education simply changes form rather than disappearing. Some young Amish adults pursue informal study in fields like midwifery or massage therapy later in life, reading books on the subject or attending conferences, though never with the intention of earning an official license the way an outsider would. Others take correspondence courses to learn skills like accounting if they plan to run a business of their own someday, fitting study time around a full workday rather than the other way around. Many Amish adults later reflect that their 8th grade education prepared them fully for the only life they were raised to live, with one former Amish teacher noting that her own schooling taught her everything she needed, except a handful of subjects like algebra and certain sciences that she had to study briefly years later when pursuing a GED. That detail is telling. For those who remain within the community their entire lives, the 8th grade ceiling is rarely felt as a limitation, since farming, trade, work, and household management do not require the subjects an Amish education leaves out. For the small number who eventually choose to leave the community, the picture looks different. Some pursue a GED in their late teens or early 20s, specifically to open doors their original schooling never aimed toward, whether that means college, a licensed trade, or work in the outside world that requires formal credentials. This path is harder, often requiring them to catch up on subjects like advanced mathematics or science largely on their own. But for the vast majority who stay, the learning never really stops. It simply moves out of the schoolhouse and into the fields, the kitchens, the workshops, and the daily life of a community that has educated its young this same way for well over a century. The last day of school for an Amish 14-year-old is not the dramatic milestone an outsider might expect. There is no cap thrown in the air, no diploma framed on a wall, no 4 more years of adolescence cushioning the transition into adulthood. Instead, there is a quiet program, a final game of softball, a handwritten gift from a teacher barely older than the student receiving it, and then a walk home that ends one chapter and opens another almost immediately. By the next morning, childhood as defined by the schoolhouse is over, replaced by apprenticeship in the field or the home, by fathers and mothers stepping into the role their own parents once held. It can look abrupt from the outside, even unsettling to those raised within a system where education stretches well into the 20s. But within the Amish worldview, this is not a loss of opportunity. It is the beginning of the only education that has ever mattered to this way of life, learning by doing, under the steady hand of family, inside a community that has shaped its young this same way for generations. The schoolhouse closes its door on a 14-year-old, but the lessons, in a very real sense, are only just beginning.